y'all, it is Nikki and welcome back to the channel for what I think is going to be a pretty chill video, sort of a brain dump of the things that I have going on with my writing projects, sort of a writer diaries video. Hope you enjoy it. So the first thing I kind of want to touch on before I get into my writing projects and everything that's going on there is the live stream situation from last week. I just wanted to clarify. I did have a live stream scheduled for, I think it was last Monday. I was going to stream with Kimmy K, who I've streamed with once before. Would have been really awesome. The problem was when it came down to it, the internet was just being really spotty around that time. It still is. Might have been fine if we'd gone for it, but I was just really nervous that because of internet problems, it would just end up causing a bunch of technical issues during the stream, which is just not fun for anyone to be the person doing the live stream or to be the person watching it. So I figured it was probably best if we just press pause on it. That said, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do going forward. I would like to do some PREPtober streams, potentially some NaNoWriMo streams. We'll see what happens. Hopefully it'll work itself out. Okay, so now that that is out of the way, I need to share a revelation that struck me. While I was just going about my business the other day, thinking about Operation Ever, my sort of Peter Pan retelling project for NaNoWriMo, suddenly it just struck me that this might be a heist novel. Totally hadn't thought of it to this point. I had sort of like a gang of young people, but I thought of them more as the outsiders, like a group of kids that's just sort of fending for themselves. They're not necessarily involved in any kind of crime network or anything like that. But the more I thought about this idea that potentially this story could be a heist novel, the more excited about it I got. That makes that group of characters make so much more sense. I feel like now they'll have a reason for being together, for working together. I also like the potential that creates for double crossing. I haven't read very many heist novels, but one that I read fairly recently that, even if it's not your favorite book, like you cannot deny that it was very well written, that is Six of Crows. The cool part about Six of Crows is that when you throw that many sort of like complicated anti-heroes / heroes together, you have so much potential for like betrayal and deceit and all these things that just create a really deliciously complicated and unpredictable plot. I've also really been getting into the fairy tale retelling zone lately. I've been trying to chip away at the Peter Pan book. This morning I read a little bit and just fell in love all over again. I love that book so much. But also, I've been watching Once Upon a Time. Really is getting my creative juices flowing for ways that you can take fairy tales and kind of tweak them. I find that with me, I often get stuck in the idea that if you're going to do a fairy tale retelling, you have to be as true to the story as physically possible. Like everything that you do with your story needs to line up with something in the original. That's really restrictive thinking as far as plotting a story goes. It doesn't leave you with a lot of freedom or flexibility. That is always like my struggle, whether it's like a fairy tale retelling or even with allegory. I've dabbled in allegory a little bit, or like retellings from biblical stories, and I always get stuck with this idea that like, no, I can't venture out into this creative plot line. I can't produce this subplot. I can't do these things that I'd like to do with this story because they don't match with the original story, and so I just can't, which is so lousy. It really restricted the allegory that I tried to write. And in the end, I ended up trying to force things to be allegorically connected that like totally weren't. So with this story, I really don't want to get stuck just bound by J.M. Barrie's original masterpiece. I want to use that as sort of like a springboard and jump off of that. You have flexibility, you have creative license, you can take these stories and go in your own direction with them. That said, there is a lot that I still need to figure out for this Peter Pan story. I seriously am questioning whether I'm going to be ready to start writing in NaNoWriMo. Last year around this time, I was going to start Operation Stars with NaNoWriMo, and that was a last minute decision. Like I sort of just jumped into it. I had planning, but not super extensive planning. The thing is though, Operation Stars is a contemporary book, and so I found it a lot easier to just jump in because I knew the characters so well and I knew the basic bones of the story. Whereas with this story, not only do I still have a lot to figure out with like the characters and the bones of the story, but the world itself is just really taken its sweet time coming together. That world building element is probably going to take the longest time, and I'm just a little nervous that it won't be ready for me to sort of step into that world for the first time when NaNoWriMo comes around. Some things that are still unknowns to me, that are super fundamental, so do not judge me, are POV and tense. So as far as point of view goes, I know that I obviously need to see a good chunk of the story through the eyes of my main character. I know who she is. I've spent the last couple days kind of learning more about her, and I'm just liking her more and more, honestly. The problem is I don't really know how many POVs I want to include. I want each character to kind of have their own voice somehow, but I haven't really figured out how to do that yet. Tense is also tripping me up. Whenever I try to even just like for fun write a little sequence from this story to sort of get the creative juices flowing, I always get stuck on whether or not to do past tense or present tense. Past tense is pretty standard. That's what my Operation Fantasy Revamp is in, but present, there's just something so magical about present tense. I just love it. Operation Stars and Operation Colors are both in the present, first person. Typically, I'm not a first person kind of gal, and this story, Peter Pan's story, is not going to be in first person, I'll tell you that right now. Something about the present tense to me just takes a story that is already sort of like charming and magical and then makes it even more charming and magical. It's really, really difficult to explain. I think it's because it reminds me of like literary fiction, which I actually really, really like. There's not a lot of literary fiction that I have read that I am like totally in love with, but there are a few that have just really sort of rocked me and rocked the way I see literature and things. All the Light We Cannot See, I had to read that one in school, and that was just such a beautifully written book. I believe it was in present tense. I'm pretty sure it was. Because of my schooling and everything, I actually have to read a lot more literary fiction than I do genre fiction, so I'm honestly more comfortable with that style of writing, which is sort of why Stars and Operation Colors both have kind of like an upmarket bent, because that's just the kind of writing that I'm totally in love with. For the Peter Pan story, I know that it seems like more of a genre fiction kind of thing, like just, you know, a young adult fantasy, a fairy tale retelling, but I kind of want to bring that magic into the story, that sort of creativity that you get in the literary genre where you don't have to follow all the rules, where you can kind of play with things, play with tense, play with different voices, play with different mediums, and I really want to try something like that. I'm trying to find that balance of drawing on the things that I love from literary fiction and sort of applying them to a more traditional like genre fiction sense, which is coming down to the decision of tense and POV for me. Those are the two things that I really, really need to figure out still, because they're so fundamental, I can't really start without knowing them for sure. Also, this is just sort of like a rant side note kind of thing, but I think I read somewhere that it is not necessarily advisable to have a bunch of POVs going on at once, and I just really don't agree with that. Like, not only do I think that's just really fun to write, but all of my favorite books have multiple POVs. For example, the Lunar Chronicles. I mean, you have so many key characters that you bounce around between, but Marissa Meyer is not afraid to jump to like a more obscure side character if there's something that needs to be shown there too. And I think that's important. I never found that confusing or hard to follow. I just thought it was really cool. I know that there are probably do's and don'ts of like which characters you're supposed to hear from and making sure that things aren't too confusing for the reader, but I just remember reading that and thinking like, not sure I'm on board with that. Next up, a little update on Operation Fantasy Revamp. I have been slowly but surely clawing my way through that story. Seriously. I'm really liking it, but it's just really sort of laborious writing out the scene that I'm currently in. The whole sequence is between two characters who have fairly recently met and absolutely hate each other. The tricky part about this is that I've written it so many times before that now that I'm sort of venturing into like a new telling of it, where I'm really shaking things up for the first time, it's sort of scary. Like, I can't tell if things feel wrong just because they're different from what they were before and what I'm so used to, or if it's just not as good as it was before. Is this better? Is this worse? Am I just scared to do something different? That's really been tripping me up. Also, the characters themselves are just so much more complicated than they were in the last draft. One character that I'm working with doesn't remember his identity, so he's like two separate people crammed into one, but they don't remember that they're one person. He's got a past, but like only remembers bits and pieces, which is really hard to keep track of because he needs to know certain things, but then he also needs to not know certain things in order for the plot to work. It's just been really, really confusing. And on that note, because this is a writer diary and it's all about honesty, confession, I have not been great with my time management as far as writing goes. With school and everything, I have so far been keeping on top of everything. But with writing, that has been kind of pushed to the back burner, which is bad because I really want to keep prepping and preparing for NaNoWriMo, but I just find that when the end of the day rolls around, I'm not really feeling it. So I think part of my problem is that Operation Fantasy Revamp just needs to sort of take a break, need to press pause on that one so that I can focus for the rest of the month, all my writing time, on prepping for Operation Ever, my Peter Pan retelling. Before I sign off, I just want to say that I am really, really thankful. It's actually Thanksgiving today, incidentally. I'm feeling so blessed right now. The Lord is just so good. I'm so thankful for the inspiration He has given me, for the new projects He's given me, for the time He's given me. I'm thankful for all of you guys and for how supportive everybody has been and the things I've learned this year and the ways that I've grown since last year at this time. I just wanted to share that with you guys. Take a second today and just thank God for all the incredible things He's doing, because He's doing incredible things. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that your prep for NaNoWriMo is going well if you're doing NaNoWriMo, and if not, that just whatever you're currently working on is going well. If you like this video, feel free to like and subscribe and let me know in the comments what you are working on and maybe what you're thankful for today. And as always, do not forget to spend some time in the clouds today.